Okay. Hi, you guys. I think I am live now. Am I live? Okay. I'm sorry for being late. But Dominic Cummings was many minutes late for his live thing. So I'm sorry for being late. Uh, um, so I've been thinking about what to read. Oh, right. My name is Temi Oh. I'm the author of this book, Do You Dream of Terra-Two? I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, there we go. Um, I'm the author of Do You Dream of Terra-Two, which is a book about British space travel. It's about a group of astronauts who are going to travel to an Earth-like planet. It takes 23 years to get there, so a lot of the astronauts have to be under the age, have to be quite young. So my main characters are 18 to 20, and they've sort of signed up on this journey um, to leave Earth behind, and they've basically sacrificed a lot of. They're going to sacrifice a lot of their adulthood to go to Terra-Two. So I'm distracted by seeing who's watching, which apparently seems to be two people. Feel free to say hi in the messages, and then I'll say hi back. So I will read a tiny bit of the opening, and then maybe there'll be more people around, and then we'll have a chat, and then I'll read something else. It is just like Earth, Terra-Two. It has turned in silence for millennia on the same spiraled arm of the galaxy. It is enveloped in temperate air, oxygen, nitrogen, noble gases, dark oceans licking empty shores. It is luxuriant with life. Trees burst from the dirt. Electric blue fish slalom through coral reefs, and the wind is heavy with spores that germinate in the shadows. Wild, everything, the land and the flowers, but there is nobody on it. When we ask why, they say, because we haven't sent anyone there yet. Although they're really saying, because there is no one else out there, not on any of the worlds. We are the only thinking heads in the universe. We were taught that for a while the universe existed and not one person knew. Stars exploded, nebulae collapsed, atoms crashed together and formed planets, then quiet oceans where single-celled organisms swallowed light and learned to flourish. Then more complex life, plants. Then creatures dragged their heavy bodies from primordial seas, shook off fins, feathers, opened eyes, but not one of them was capable of awe. Not one of them wondered at the lines on their palms and asked how, or shouted at the stars as we did for a time, searching for fellow travellers. We know now that consciousness is rare. It is wretched and magnificent and lonely. It allowed humans to conquer the empty moon, the mountains of Mars, then Europa, Callista, the rings of Saturn. They planned the journey to Terra-Two, and when they named the 6 of us, how could we say no? We were young. They had hauled us from obscurity to hurl us at the stars, and we were dizzied by shallow fantasies of being the first, of leaving our footprints on the land, pushing our flag down into the dirt, giving it a name, dividing and taming it. Did we forget about the darkness? Did we shrug off the loneliness and the labour? Did we regret? Of course we did. We have been told that Terra-Two is waiting for us, and perhaps it still is. Perhaps the sand has washed up on the shores in quiet anticipation of the day we set our souls dancing across it. Some nights we ask ourselves why we chose to leave everything behind. We used to think we had many reasons, but really, there is only one. So, I can see there are now 8 people watching. Hello. Oh, 9. I hope you're having a good dinner. It's not been a great week, you guys. So, there's a pandemic happening, and that's heartbreaking. And then there's this sort of terrifying fact that apparently me and the people I love are more likely to die from COVID-19, which is also extra scary because you can't help but think, what is fair? I think a lot of the reason a lot of people are upset right now in relation to the killing of George Floyd is just because it's not just that someone was killed, which is horrible, and that people had to fight really hard for the person who killed that person to get justice. But it's just that a lot of us are living in a world that was kind of built off the backs of treating us like we're less than human, like our lives don't matter, like our lives can be extinguished, like George Floyd. And not only are a lot of the people that happened to not getting punished, in a lot of cases they're rewarded. I think that's the thing that I think it's just that sort of ache of feeling like the world, I guess, should be a bit fairer, should have more justice, that kind of makes all of us feel really ill and sad and lonely. So I was, today I've been listening and re-listening to this novel that I loved by Ta-Nehisi Coates called Between the World and Me, which is about growing up in America. And he talks about, he has this really beautiful extract that I sort of wanted to share. I did not write this, Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote it, but I'm going to just read a tiny bit of it. The book Between the World and Me is a letter that he writes to his son, and it's just kind of about what it's like to grow up in America. So he says, "I have raised you to respect every human being as singular, and you must extend that same respect into the past. Slavery is not an indefinable mass of flesh. It is a particular, specific, enslaved woman whose mind is as active as your own, whose range of feelings is as vast as your own, who prefers the way the light falls in one particular spot in the woods, who enjoys fishing where the water eddies in the nearby stream, who loves her mother in her own particular way, thinks her sister talks too loud, has a favourite cousin, a favourite season, who excels at dressmaking and knows inside herself that she is as intelligent and as capable as anyone. Slavery is that same woman born in a world that loudly proclaims its love of freedom and describes this world in its essential texts. A world in which these same professors hold this woman a slave, hold her mother a slave, her father a slave, her daughter a slave. And when this woman peers back into the generations, all she can see is the enslaved. She can hope for more. She can imagine some future for her grandchildren, but when she dies, the world, which is the only world she will really know, ends. For this woman, enslavement is not a parable. It is damnation. It is the never-ending night. And the length of that night is most of our history. Never forget that we were enslaved in this country longer than we've been free. Never forget that for 250 years, black people were born into chains, whole generations, followed by more generations who knew nothing but chains. So one of the conversations I've been having with a friend of mine is, well, why do I feel so emotional about this thing that's happening in another country with another history? Why, as a black British person, like my grandparents were born in Nigeria, they came to Britain, my grandma came on a scholarship, so why do I feel so sad? It's not like I was stolen from my country. But and the British education system actually isn't very great at teaching you about this, but like Britain also has a whole history of slavery, and the things that are happening there just remind us of the things that happen here. There is this article that I was personally shocked by that I saw on the Guardian website. I'll put the link in the show notes, written by David Olusoga, who says that the Treasury were paying off the money that they paid to slave traders until 2015. He says, "It's hard to imagine why somebody at the Treasury thought the subject of slavery was fertile territory from which they might harvest their weekly surprising fact." Just after lunchtime on the 9th of February, the department's Twitter page presented its third of a million followers with its latest offering. And this is what they said. "Millions of you helped to end the slave trade through your taxes," it trumpeted. Below, under an image of Africans being marched in yokes and ropes into slavery, the tweet continued, "Did you know? In 1833, Britain used 20 million, 40% of its national budget, to buy freedom for all slaves in the empire. The amount of money borrowed for the Slavery Abolition Act was so large it wasn't paid off until 2015, which means that living British citizens helped to end the slave trade." I can kind of understand why some people, my family included, who have been continuing paying their taxes, might have been a little bit upset to think that all their taxes were going to paying off the historical debt that it cost to pay slave traders and the ancestors of slave traders. So I think like a lot of the upset right now is because a lot of the things that are happening right now just remind us of those sort of unfairnesses. And I sort of feel kind of frivolous just using this time to plug my novel and not explain, talk about some of the things that I've been feeling. I find it really hard to talk about race. I went to a school where I was the only black girl in my year, and there are so many of my friends are white, and I totally love them. And my husband is white, and I guess it's hard sometimes to talk about things that make everyone feel uncomfortable, make everyone feel really unhappy. But sort of in the wake of it this week, I felt like it would be just kind of irresponsible not to. So those are those things. I have 15 minutes left, and I could try and cheer up your evening by reading you a little bit more from my book if you like. So I thought I'd just read from chapter 1. Jesse. He had developed the habit of tapping his thumb against the tips of his fingers, the index first, 3, 4, 5, again and again, perfected to a quick, silent art. He had read online that this was a test of neurological agility. When the neurons in his brain began to pop out like light bulbs, he would no longer be able to perform this minor feat. Nor would he be able to roll a 2-pence coin over his knuckles, forward and then back in one fluid motion, so the penny slid across his lissom hands. Another skill mastered over years of staring out the window during tutorials, watching blossoms fall, and thinking about death. Jesse thought about death a lot in the beginning, with the same detached curiosity roused by the sight of a car accident. He had been told that he would die before he turned 20. During a trip to Indonesia, a medicine man had taken his sister's hand and told her that she would fall sick but not leave this earth, and then stared down at the lines of Jesse's own palm and said that in 9 years he would. It was only after his sister's preternatural recovery from cerebral malaria that Jesse began to give some thought to how he might die. He'd been 11 then, young and relatively healthy. It was unlikely to be an accident of genetics or something insidious and tragic like leukemia. He hoped then that when death would come, it would be quick as a knife. Something dramatic as a car accident or a gunshot wound seemed to him romantic but unlikely. Jesse believed that if anything was going to kill him, it would be his brain. A tumour, an aneurysm, a sudden unexplained blow to the back of the head. Whenever his mother or his family pediatrician intervened, promising he was healthy and unlikely to die, he would remember the sight of his sister's green eyes flashing open in the humid hospital room, just after the doctors had told his parents there was nothing more that they could do. Jesse sat in class, tapping his fingers and imagining the build-up of intracranial pressure, his anxious, overactive brain swelling like a sponge against the cage of his skull. By the time his family left Indonesia and returned to London, life was like a fickle lover, leaving him guessing and sick and wanting more. A few more years was not enough. He might never go to Argentina, never have sex, never ride an open-top convertible along the California coastline with the wind in his hair and shadows at his back. All these things had been his, and yet he felt as if they'd been taken from him. The future, the freedom to hope for it. His suffering, made ineffably worse by the fact that no one believed him, grew so bad that by age 13 he was a morbid recluse. He spun away from his classmates like a satellite in a doomed orbit, lay in bed, tallying all the time that he had already lost, too tired to get up, to cut his nails, to get dressed. His older sister would stand over his bed in her crumpled school uniform and shout, "Some people have real problems, you know." But when the applications to the off-world colonization program opened up, Jesse saw his salvation. Like most people his age, he had grown up with dreams of Terra-Two, built papier-mâché models of habitable exoplanets in kindergarten. He had been 7 or 8 when the search for life on Terra-Two had started, with unmanned satellites landing on alien shores and sending back images of the verdant Earth, clean water lakes, a thriving ecosystem, and no humans. By the end of the 20th century, many countries had mastered interplanetary travel and set their sights on neighbouring stars. When the grainy footage of this new and beautiful planet was broadcast across the globe, Terra-Two ignited the imagination of every child Jesse's age. The tabloids had declared it habitable long before NASA issued an official statement, and soon after that the race to colonize Terra-Two truly began. Sorry, I'm just taking the time. I think I have 10 minutes. The UK Space Agency put out a national call for healthy 12 to 13-year-olds with an aptitude for physics and biology to join a team of experienced astronauts on the 23-year-long journey to a new planet. The group would be called the Beta, and they would be chosen from a pool of students enrolled on an accelerated course of study at Dalton Academy for Aerospace Science. Sorry. Every time I read accelerated course of study, I think about that line in Hamilton where he's like, anyway, that's what I think of. A school founded to train a generation of astronauts, engineers, and employees of the UK Space Agency. Jesse was eating dinner one night when he heard that the organisation were looking for people his age. It occurred to him then that perhaps he was not destined to die at 20 after all. Perhaps leaving Earth on board a space shuttle had been the prophecy instead. The application involved months of interviews and physical assessments and several rounds of grueling examinations. Jesse was 13 when he was finally admitted to Dalton Academy. The main building was a repurposed sanatorium, the words "New Addington Home for Incurables" still conspicuously etched into the crumbling stone architrave. The initial adjustment was difficult for Jesse, who had been the brightest in his school, 2 years ahead of the other students his age, but was now amongst his academic peers. His days began before the first glimmer of dawn at 5:30 a.m. with a compulsory run around the training facility, a cold shower before breakfast, and then classes that began at 8 a.m. and finished at 8 p.m. This was me trying to come up with what can I imagine as the most hellish schedule. So that's what I wrote. The first year involved cramming 4 years' worth of exams, GCSEs and A-levels, into 13 punishing months. He staggered through those weeks, along with the still starstruck students in his class, only to find that there was no time to rest on the weekends. Saturdays were for training and tutorials, and after lunch on Sunday, they were herded into the library for 6 hours of silent study. With only 3 weeks a year of summer holiday, months ran drearily into each other. Each vacation, every summer's day, every light-limbed afternoon was sacrificed to the laminated textbooks he hauled around like bricks, scribbling up flashcards, taking incomprehensible worksheets, watching his sister sunbathe out in the garden as he memorized tables of data, tempted every hour by the mid-August barbecues and the sweet smell of sizzling beef, the sounds of his parents' laughter drifting through his bedroom window as he rewrote specific biochemical pathways so many times they became muscle memory. The stress was sickening. Many of the school students broke under it. During his first term, Jesse had been grouped into a team of 6 called an expedition, and by the end of the first year, 1 of them had dropped out voluntarily and 2 had been expelled after failing an exam. When he returned to Dalton the next year, at age 14, their initial cohort of 300 had halved. They began studying aeronautics, degree-level physics, geology, and propulsion engineering. 2 months into the new term, Jesse returned from a weekend away to find that his roommate had been in bed for 3 days, sheets soaking, eyes wet and vacant and haunted. "I just can't do it anymore," he told Jesse. "I can't even move." He'd been collected an hour later by his parents and a mental health officer. That same year, a boy drowned in the neutral buoyancy lab, and although there was an investigation, Jesse was horrified to find that life at Dalton went on as normal. Classes continued the next day without interruption, although one morning run was cancelled, and the flag above the observatory flew at half-mast for the rest of the week. In spite of all of this, every time his parents asked if he wanted to drop out, Jesse was surprised to find that he did not. He had never been in love, but perhaps this was close to it. He had never wanted anything more than he wanted to go to space. Dalton pushed him to his limits. Each completed chapter of a book was a new triumph of understanding. After staring at a genetics text until the words began to blur, he would gain a happy, tentative understanding of Okazaki fragments or the Shine-Delgado sequence, and his heart would rejoice. And etched into the school's front gates were the words, "It is better to fly like a falcon for half a year than to crawl like a turtle for a lifetime." The hope of being one of the six students chosen for the Terra-Two mission made it into his every waking thought. He had plastered his walls with diagrams of spacecraft, maneuvers, and constellations so that he could memorize them as he lay on his back. The prospects sustained him, kept him running laps across the frosted ground when his fingers were prickly and numb with pre-dawn cold. He could stand all of it because he knew that leaving Earth was not merely his destiny, it was his only chance to live beyond his 20th birthday. Just checking the time again. The first 4 years of work paid off. Jesse passed his exam and was selected to be an astronaut candidate in the group that the students liked to call the Final 50. Everything was different by then. 250 hopefuls had been culled, friends, confidants. Jesse felt isolated. For the first time, he doubted himself. Every one of the brilliant students who remained in his cohort believed that the sky was their destiny also. They could study 48 hours straight in their dorm rooms and ace the impenetrable weekly exams. Everyone became more acutely aware of the competition, of the fact that years of toil could so easily amount to nothing, that more than half of them would never make it to the shuttle, would ache forever with private longing, earthbound and wretched. Students Jesse had once considered friends became cool and suspicious, leaning over his work to smile at errors only they could see. Dalton became a lonelier place, and Jesse began to wonder how much he belonged after all. Every now and then his mind would swell to great heights of tenuous certainty. Of course he would make it. Hadn't it been prophesied? Only to slip again and again into nail-biting anxiety. When the result finally arrived, it was in the form of a letter 2 weeks before graduation. The students chosen for the beta and the backup crew would stay on and train for 10 months until the launch, but everyone else would be discharged, free to seize the rest of their lives. But what lives? Jesse opened it alone, behind the weightless environment training facility, watching the silver July light on the surface of the water, fingers cold with dread. His name was printed at the top, Jesse Soloway. And the heading underneath was Off-World Colonization Program. And the first word that grabbed his attention, the first sickening word, was unfortunately. So I think I have like 3 minutes left. Thank you guys for staying with me. Oh, I can just see. Hi, Tony. It's good to see you. That is my old librarian from my school in Emmanuel. It's very nice to see him. He also wrote me an email, which I will respond to soon. I can only write 3 or 4 emails in a day. Thank you guys for staying with me. Thank you for listening to what I had to say. I know it's all really heavy and it makes no one happy to hear any of these things. But I don't know, if you are white and you're thinking about how you can help, I definitely think reading about it does help. Talking to any friends that you know who might be affected by this and asking them how you can help them. Joining protests, signing petitions. And like, maybe we should all try and feel optimistic because, okay, We can't change the past, but we can change the future. All of us can be part of that. And you can be part of that. You can be part of making the world a better place. And the world needs you to help. Everyone needs you to help. So yes, thank you guys. I'm going to end the video now. Oh, also, thank you, Kevin, too.